So I just saw Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Now for context, I have almost no nostalgia for this franchise. I didn't grow up with the original trilogy like a lot of you guys have. I believe I watched the Raiders of the Lost Ark once, a very long time ago, but I don't really remember much from it. So I basically watched the first 4 Indiana Jones movies for the very first time this year. I found the original trilogy to be just great. I can see why these movies are so beloved and timeless. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull wasn't that good, but I wouldn't say it was necessarily bad. Anyways, don't worry, I'll make sure to put out a ranking of all of these movies, including Dial of Destiny, sometime this week, so I can talk more in detail about my thoughts for each of these films. Anyways, let's get started on my thoughts on this new Indiana Jones movie. And I thought it was fine. I didn't love it or anything. It has a lot of obvious flaws, but I didn't necessarily hate it, and it has enough worthwhile stuff that I enjoyed it enough. Again, like all my other reviews, this will be spoiler free until the end, where I'll give you a spoiler warning. So this movie has been getting very mixed reception all over the internet, and I completely see why. Some people hate it, some people love it, and a lot of people are right in the middle like me. It does a lot of things that are very questionable, but it also has a lot of good moments, and I feel like people are just happy to see Harrison Ford as this iconic character one more time on the big screen. So let's just get started with the things that I liked. First off, Harrison Ford is still just as charismatic and iconic as this character. He may not be able to do all the action and fights and stunts now, but he can still provide all the good one-liners and jokes. He actually does a great job during some of the emotional moments of the film. In this movie, Indiana Jones is in a different stage of life, and he's at his most vulnerable and broken state that we have ever seen him in, and we get to see him in a new light. He gets a pretty big arc. This reminded me a lot of Luke Skywalker in Star Wars The Last Jedi, though I think that Luke's arc was handled better. Still, you can tell that Harrison Ford really does love to play this character. Also, it's just nice again to see Indiana Jones back on the big screen after over 15 years, knowing that it's gonna be his last adventure. There are lots of nice callbacks and references to past movies that I enjoyed, despite me not having a lot of nostalgia for this franchise, and the music still works. The main villain was decent, I guess, though his henchmen were like really bland. The best fight scene or sequence in this movie was definitely the one in the beginning where there's a flashback to World War II, and we see 15 minutes of Indiana Jones killing Nazis again, and that sequence really did remind me of the original trilogy, and it just felt like classic Indiana Jones adventure. Now, as for the final act and climax, lots of people have been saying that I just went off the rails and lost them, and yeah, the stuff that they do in the finale is really dumb and out of nowhere. But it also was the part of the movie where I was actually like fully entertained and focused, and it was unexpected despite how stupid it was. Since for the majority of the movie, especially in the middle, the adventure was just very generic and forgettable, and nothing really interesting happens. I found myself pretty bored for a good chunk of the movie. It's just way too long. This movie is over 2 hours and 30 minutes long, and you can really feel that runtime. They just draw out so many sequences and scenes, and they add lots of unnecessary stuff into them. So yeah, that's a huge issue that I have against this film. Also, a big part of what made the original Indiana Jones trilogy so timeless was the practical sets and stunt work. That was something that made the action sequences more intense, exciting, and well, it helped it feel more real. But the action sequences in this film are just really CGI heavy, and you can tell that there's a lot of green screen. They de-aged Harrison Ford for the beginning sequence, and it looked pretty good for like half of the shots. But for the other half, it just looks very off, especially when he's talking. The visuals didn't look bad. I think that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull did a lot worse, but you can still tell that there was a lot of visual effects that they put into these action scenes. I understand that Harrison Ford is like 80 years old and he can't do the stunts that the previous Indiana Jones movies had, but I just wish that they could have used more real and practical sets. Another big problem here is that I did not like the new side characters. Helena, Indy's goddaughter, is the co-lead in this film, and they kinda tried to make her seem like the new Indiana Jones. But I just found her so unlikable for the first 2/3 of the movie, and maybe a little more than that. She's just way too cruel and mean to Indiana Jones, especially in the beginning of the movie. It's even worse when we actually see Indy in a really broken phase of life. I get that they wanted to give her an arc, but I just did not like to be around this character. Also, there's this other kid sidekick character who was so forgettable and bland. He doesn't have any unique traits, and you feel them trying to copy the character of Short Round, who you can't recreate. He's too perfect. So all of these new characters that they add into this film, except maybe the main villain, just don't leave any impact on me, and they were just so generic. Alright, now I'm going into spoilers, so skip to this timestamp if you don't want spoilers. First off, let's talk about the climax of the movie. I was at least intrigued when, they're in the plane and about to enter this portal in the sky, and then Indiana Jones starts yelling about how the Nazis are going to the wrong place or time. There was actually a sense of mystery about where they were going to end up to. I definitely wasn't expecting them to end up 2,000 years in the past, and I think this final act was at least better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls climax, which had like the aliens and UFOs. I mean, this finale is still really off the rails and out of nowhere. It's not even close to the same quality level of the original trilogy's climaxes, but again, it at least held my attention. Also, it was nice to see Marion again. I liked how they only included her in the ending instead of throwing her in halfway through the movie randomly. But I just have to ask, where is Short Round? Like seriously, he's one of my favorite characters in this entire franchise, and he doesn't even show up once after Temple of Doom. Like, you got Sala back, but you couldn't even find a small cameo for Short Round? I'm 100% sure that Ke Huy Quan would have loved to come back again, especially after that Oscar win, but nope, he doesn't even show up. We're never gonna see him again. It's just, this was such a missed opportunity. It's even worse when we find out that the kid sidekick character had the same backstory as Short Round, so that made me mad. I guess that if I had to choose an ending for Indiana Jones, this movie would be at least a better send-off to the character than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but still not great. I think that you should have just left it at The Last Crusade, where we see him riding into the sunset. That would have been the perfect send-off, but whatever. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is fine. It's not bad, but it's not great. It's nice to see Harrison Ford play Indiana Jones again for the final time, especially on the big screen. The first 15 minutes were pretty great and reminded me of a classic Indiana Jones adventure. We get to see this character in a brand new light. He's in the most broken and vulnerable state that we've ever seen him in this franchise, so that was interesting. There are some nice emotional moments and callbacks. The music is still really great, but I just found the overall adventure to be so forgettable, and the same excitement and magic isn't there. The action sequences were overall very underwhelming. I wish that there was more practical effects. The side characters were unlikable. The third act was entertaining enough, but it also just goes off the rails. This movie is just way too long. It just feels like a generic modern blockbuster. I guess I enjoyed it enough, but it has a lot of obvious flaws. So I'm giving Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny a 6 out of 10. Even though that might be a bit generous.